workshop. All right, welcome to Landing a PM Internship with Amy Rue. I'll have her introduce herself in a second when I hand it over. But a quick introduction to Superposition. We're a 501c3 dedicated to bridging the gender gap in tech. Every year we host the Bay Area's largest all-female and non-binary hackathon. And right here you can see Superposition 4, which we hosted last February at Uber. If you want to follow us on social media, please feel free to do so. We post a lot of tips such as landing internships and other workshop opportunities, so be sure to check that out. The goal of our workshop series that we're holding right now is to not only allow our community to continue their education during this quarantine period, but we also want to help fundraise for our PPE fundraiser. There's a lot of healthcare workers on the front lines of the pandemic who don't have access to sufficient equipment to protect themselves. In fact, our outreach director, Shamita, and we interviewed one of the nurses working in the Bay Area, and he talked about how his mental health is being impacted by the lack of PPE, and his employer isn't able to provide enough. So if you even have $1 or $5 to spare, please consider donating to our fundraiser at the link on the screen or by Venmoing me. With that, I'll hand it over to Amy, and let's get started with our workshop.
Awesome. So do you want me to share my video with everyone or just keep it off just for the PowerPoint?
You can keep your video on. Are you able to share?
Yeah, sure. Awesome. Okay, hi. So it looks like I'm the only one sharing my screen, which is cool, but I'll pull up my PowerPoint in just a second here. Again, really thank you everyone for coming today. I know you guys probably have a lot to do on Fridays, like homework, projects and stuff. So I'm really honored you guys are all here. And hopefully I threw together something that'd be worthwhile of your time. And yeah. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna present this. So yeah, today's workshop in this series is how to land a PM interview as soon as this loads. Cool. If you guys hear any weird background noises, they're mowing my lawn right now, so that's the reason why. At any time, if you guys have questions, you guys can just pop it in the chat and ask me, or you guys can save the questions for later. I'll have a Q&A process period in which you guys can ask questions, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. So yeah, first of all, a little bit about myself. My name's Amy Rue, and I'm currently studying information systems at Cal Poly SLO. I've done 3 internships, the first of which was a business development internship at Geodis in 2018 summer. Then I did a product manager intern at Phone to Action 2019, and then this upcoming summer, I'm doing a project manager internship at Salesforce. So kind of just walking you guys through how I got all of these internships. 2018, the first one, it was kind of serendipitous, not exactly oh, I planned this and I strategized this, I'm gonna get this internship during high school. Pretty much how that happened was I think I was waiting for my mom to do something, and I was gonna drop off something at her house or where she was at this restaurant. She was meeting with this client, and then she was like, oh, hey, do you want to come over and drop it off here right now? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went to this restaurant where she was meeting her client, and she was like, hey, you might as well join us for lunch since you're here already. And I was like, oh, sure, free food sounds good. So we kind of just sat down, and then she chatted to me with about my career interests, what I wanted to do. And then afterwards, she's like, hey, I'm actually hosting these trade shows, and I'm going to this couple of expos, and I need someone to help me out with all this stuff. So would you be down? Come, and do you want to be an intern? And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. I mean, I'm in high school, so I really don't have anything else to do anyways. And so I did that internship, and that was actually what made me kind of want to go into business as a major, because I thought it was really interesting. Fast forward to freshman year of college, I got really involved in the tech community. So where I go to school, Cal Poly, we're a polytechnic college. So a lot of the activities there are revolved around the STEM area. And so I really got sucked into these hackathons that I kept on attending, a lot of tech conferences I went to all the time. And so I realized that there's this thing called product management, which is kind of an intersection between design, business, and tech that I was really interested in doing. And so I wanted to be a product manager intern. I think around February of my freshman year, I attended a hackathon at Stanford University called Tree Hacks, which is the annual hackathon that they host every year. And I actually won a track prize for one of the tracks that was sponsored by the startup called Phone to Action, and they're in Washington, D.C. And so after the competition, they kind of offered me the software engineering internship. And I was I really want to do product management. So I called my recruiter for the company and I asked her if there was a product management position opened. And she was like, oh, there really isn't, but if you want, you can talk to a product manager at the company or something. And I was like, yeah, I'm down, set me up with that. And so she actually let me call like the VP of product at the company. And I was really intimidated at first because I was like, wow, this guy is super important. But I kind of made my case and I was like, hey, software engineering is like really cool, but I also really want to do product management. So if you have a position open, like I'd love to do it or like something up like that. And he's like, yeah, sure. Like you can be a PM intern. And we talked about like what my interests were and how that aligned with PM. And so at the company for that summer, they had like 30 engineering interns, like 10 design, sales, customer experience interns. And I was the only PM intern just because I practically begged them to kind of create that position for me. So that was like really awesome. And then this summer, I'm interning at Salesforce, and how that happened was I hosted a corporate tour at Salesforce through one of the organizations I'm involved with on campus called Cal Poly Consulting. And one of the alumni that I hosted the panel with, we got pretty close and like we got to like chat about like a lot of stuff that we had in common. And I was like looking for an internship, I think around January, February. I was a bit late to the intern search game because fall quarter I was more preoccupied with like my academics and like club stuff. And so when I saw the application like for the internship that I was applying for, I kind of like shot her an email and I was like, hey, do you know if this position's still open? And she was like, yeah, let me contact the recruiter and I'll also like send you a referral, which was really, really nice of her to do so. And so literally like minutes later, the recruiter emailed me like, hey, do you want to set up like an interview just to like phone screen? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. So I went through a phone screen with the recruiter and then I did 2 more interviews with my direct manager and then the manager of my direct department. And yeah, I think like after talking to them, I guess they liked me enough. And so I got an offer from them, which was pretty cool. But the basis of this workshop mostly is to kind of like talk to you guys more about what product management is. I think PM is like a pretty broad classification. I know these 2 letters like represent like product management, program management, project management, and people are like, what's the difference between all 3 of these? So just to clarify it like that a little bit more, product management is like when you're managing the life cycle of the product. So let's say like your product is like the iPhone, right? You'd be basically responsible for this product from its like conceivement to like when the iPhone dies as a product or you sell it on market to like another company. So you'd be managing like all the releases, like all the product information of the specific iPhone that you're the product manager of. If you're a program manager, then you'd be in charge of like maybe launches or like programs within the company. So let's say that you're switching from like the iPhone 7 to like the iPhone 11 and you want to like kind of launch a program for these 2 products, then the program manager kind of facilitates the launch of like transitioning between these 2 products. Like that's a program within itself. Project management is like when a product spec is already defined for you as in terms of like what the project is and like what the program is and like as the project, you're just like making sure everyone follows through. So I would say product management is more about like feature prioritization for the product that you're in charge of. Program management is like facilitating timelines and deadlines for like the program that you're launching. And then project management is like a smaller specific project that you're working on, making sure that like the engineers and designers on your team kind of go through with the project itself. They stay on track for like the timelines and basically completing the project. Obviously, these roles and responsibilities vary from company to company. Being a program manager at Microsoft is definitely being different than like being a non-technical program manager at Amazon. So I'd recommend just like checking the job responsibilities and roles and looking through them to see like which one's the best fit for you. Okay, so next up, I'm going to be focusing mostly on product management because that's kind of like the area where I have the most expertise in. And what kind of got me into product management was the fact that I really wanted a career within the intersection of technology, business, and design. So I really enjoy programming, but it's not something that I want to do every day of my life as a career. I really enjoy business analytics, but I also want to see like a project from end to end. I don't want to just be there as a consultant, kind of advising upper management on what steps they should take. I want to be able to like kind of facilitate the entire actionable of the product itself. And then in terms of design, I think it's like really cool to design things. Design's more than just like the aestheticism of like a product or something. It's really about being able to kind of pick out like user empathy features and like why you want to design a product for something. Like for me, something I really enjoy with like a design is that I enjoy making products more user accessible. So for people who maybe are autistic or they're colorblind, they don't have the same ease of use as a lot of us do when it comes to interaction with a product. And so I think being able to fine tune features to make products more accessible, for me, that's something that I really enjoy doing. But I also don't want to spend all my time completely just like prototyping a project. And like, I want to be able to create like my own timeline and like my own vision for how I want a product to roll out. So I thought product management was a really good hybrid because it combined all three of these things I really enjoy doing, and I wouldn't have to kind of like choose between all three of them. So what the roles of the product manager are is you're basically acting as an integrator, a facilitator, and a communicator. Integration in terms of data is really important. I think data is like gold now in Silicon Valley. It's all about like knowing, like tracking like information, like cookies, like what do your customers do all the time. Some really helpful tools and technologies for that is like one, Google Analytics. Google Analytics, they track like clicks, conversions on features that you have on products, but they also tell you a lot about like your customer demographic. So as a PM, I think it's really important to know how to use like Mixpanel or like Google Analytics or just like analytical tools just to be able to view like insights from your customers and how you can use that to maybe change certain features of your product to make sure that there are higher conversions and tools of use in that specific area or field. Amazon Web Services, I know a lot of companies, they like to host a lot of their services in the cloud now. So it's just a really nice like thing to be able to say you know how to work with Amazon Web Services, because I think that skill translates over to like knowing a lot of other cloud-based tools and technologies. I know that Amazon Web Services, they do offer certain certifications that you can get, like the Amazon Cloud Architect certification or like a certified AWS Scrum Master certification. So I definitely look into those because those do help you out on your resume a lot. Um, as a product manager, you don't have to do that much coding, I think, depending on the technicality of your product management. But I think that SQL is a really helpful skill to learn. So SQL is like when you're querying information from databases, or like let's say like you're migrating information from one database to another database. That's something that a product manager would have to do from time to time. So I think like knowing a query language is really helpful. And then last but not least, be really acquainted with UX researching. So what UX research is, I feel like it's overlooked a lot of times because it's one of those like more subjective fields in product management, but you kind of invite like a client on base and then you have them use your product. So let's say like I print out like certain product features and I have them go through it and I ask like, oh, do you like the way this button looks? Or like, do you want more drop-down menus here or there? How can I work to make this product more like accessible and easy to use for you as a customer? And especially if they're a customer or let's say they're a big stakeholder in the company, then it'll be super helpful because they'll be able to give you like direct input and you're kind of making the product for them. So it's really helpful to have the input of people you're making the product for to see like what a good tangible end product is. As a facilitator, you're going to be facilitating like a lot of the communication between your teams. You're going to be like in a lot of meetings all day, just like making sure everyone is on track, on the same page with all the projects. Depending on your company, some companies have daily stand-ups, which you meet on a daily basis, and then you kind of go over your team, like what everyone's been doing, how deadlines are working, like what maybe new things we need to push back, or what things we need to prioritize now on a daily basis. Agile, Scrum, and Kanban are all like methodologies for product management in which you can help like facilitate the development of your project. A lot of people use like Kanban boards. And then Jira, Asana, and Slack are just like regular technologies that you should know. Jira and Asana are both for project prioritization. They help you assign tasks to certain people on your team. You don't have to use this like if you're not even in a PM internship role. You can use this like if you're working on a group project. You can just like assign people point systems and like what to do like on Slack and like Asana. And Slack is just like a communication platform. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have used Slack in the past, but if you haven't, it's just really nice because it has like a lot of channels you can talk to people in, and it integrates like a lot of apps like Google Calendar and Google Drive. A lot of companies use Slack as a communication platform, so it's really good to get acquainted with it right now, so you won't have as much trouble getting onboarded like when you're already in the company. And as a communicator, you'll be communicating with stakeholders who are the customers of your product, the engineering team and the design team. A lot of times I feel like the design team and the engineering team, they don't really see things eye to eye because design has a certain eye for certain things, and then the engineering, they have to like work in a certain way to make sure that they're capable of integrating things that design wants. And often like there's a mismatch of like expectations, I'd say, on both sides. So it's important for you to kind of like pacify and facilitate that process. And then also explain what the project goals are to upper management who are kind of funding like your resources and like facilitating your project in general. All right, so with that being said, Here are some companies that have structured APM programs. So a lot of the times when you're just graduating from college and you're going into product management, I feel like it'll be a little bit weird because it's like, let's say there's this engineer who has been working in the industry for 10 years, right? And you're like a 22-year-old college grad. And so what really gives you the credibility to lead a project that they're working on? And it feels like, I feel like it feels kind of weird for a lot of people to manage people who are older than them or who have like more experience than them. So some companies have APM programs, which are called associate product manager programs. Associate puts you at like a junior level. So you'll have like a senior product manager that manages you, but you're also in charge of the product yourself as an APM. And so really popular companies for this are like Salesforce, kind of biased, but they have a really good program for this. You basically get to rotate through a lot of products in Salesforce, like MuleSoft, Quip, and at the graduation of this program, you get to kind of choose what product that you want to manage for. I know Facebook has the RPM program, rotational product management, which is a bit less technical in nature. So let's say like you don't come from a computer science background, regardless of whether you're like a business major, a philosophy major, or like a liberal arts background, RPMs don't necessarily have to have technical knowledge to become like an RPM in Facebook. So that's a good like program to choose if you're not necessarily coming from a more technical background. Google has an APM program, but they're very, very technically focused, and they'll probably like make you go through rounds of like technical interviews before you make it to the actual case study. So Google, it's like if you're technical, go for that program. And then all the other companies, if you guys want to take like a screenshot of the slide, it's just really good to reference. You can also go on Google and type in like PM programs for recent college grads, and I'm sure they'll have another list. Yeah, so the average cohort size of APM programs are 10 to 12 people, which is really not a lot. It's like a little bit. And so it's really, really competitive. So don't be too kind of discouraged into PM if you don't get into an APM program. I know there are plenty of people who have graduated and become like software engineers, business analysts, or even consultants, and they eventually get promoted to like a product manager or project manager position. You don't have to start off as an APM and then graduate into a PM role. Some people think that's the best way to approach it, and that's just how they do it. But by no means do you have to follow this route of like do a PM internship every summer in college and then get into APM and then become a PM. Like that's, I think, the route that many people think that you have to take to become a PM, but that's definitely not the case. Okay, and so what the actual process looks like, honestly, if you go online, there's probably a bunch of these like blueprints to success. Pay $1,000 and join my program, and I'll teach you how to get into Google and all these resources you can check out. But just from my experience, I break it into like three pretty simple parts: networking, application, and interview. And so the first step is networking. This, if anything, if there's like one thing you take away from this presentation, networking is so important. Your network is literally your net worth. And I know that sometimes there's a bad rep that comes with networking. People think like, oh, it's like what you do when you want to use people to get where you are. But that's not the case. I really think it depends on like the perspective that you approach networking with. If you're only kind of reaching out to people just to see what you can leverage them for and what they can get you, yeah, I think that's really bad. And I think that people are smart enough to see through that. But if you're genuinely out there just to like talk to people, see what fields you're interested in, what companies you want to work with, and just like make connections in that way, I don't think networking is like a bad thing. Networking is honestly how you get to like meet a lot of people. I think that if you apply for a position, there's a good chance, like especially if it's a PM position, there will be hundreds of people competing with you just to land a PM spot. And if you just fill out your application and you send it in, like that's a black hole. Like you're not going to hear anything back. You're going to get denied. You're going to get rejected. If you network and like meet people there at the company who are willing to refer you because they know about your work ethic, then you can easily bypass like hundreds of other people who are interviewing just because they just apply, but you like know people who work at the company. And a lot of companies, like especially like bigger tech companies, referrals are like the main way to get in. So I think it's really important for you guys to like just talk to people in your free time, make it a goal. Like every week I'm going to meet 2 people on LinkedIn. Networking is like really important. Another good way to do this is joining PM communities. So here's a list of like PM communities I'm a part of. There's the Remote Students PM community, which is like a bunch of students who are interested in joining or becoming product managers in the future. Daily Product Prep is like an email subscription service. So if you subscribe to their service, basically it's free, but also every weekday they send you an email of like an interview question that you would get at a product manager interview. So say like one day they email you like, oh, how would you increase Dropbox's like retention of their product by 30%? And they like send you the solution with the question that they email you, so you know how to like kind of answer the question in the future via an interview like that. Or they'll ask you like, oh, why do you want to work at Twitter? Like certain questions that people have been asked in like previous product manager interviews, they ask you like in this daily product prep email. So it's just a really good resource to have to practice potential like questions you'll get during interviews. Certain Slack communities are like Louis C. Lynn's interview community. This guy's written like a bunch of books on product management, so he knows what he's talking about. So it's just like a really good community to join to like meet people who are interested in PM and kind of learn tips from like the master himself. Product School, they host this thing called ProductCon every year, which is the largest online product conference in the United States. And they have like a weekly Ask Me About Anything thing where they invite a bunch of product managers from companies like Netflix, Uber, Yahoo, stuff like that. And they can just like, they hop on the channel for an hour. You can just ask them anything about their career. So it's also a really nice way to get exposure to like product managers in the industry. Robinhood snacks. So for those of you who are interested in investing or trading, or even if you're not interested in trading, I think just subscribe to Robinhood's like newsletter service because they teach you so much about like things that are happening in the industry. So for example, like the other day, they sent like this email out saying like, oh, Twitter has decided to permanently like move like or offer the option to work from home for like the rest of the employees for the rest of their life. And I was like, wow, that's like really cool, right? And so certain news like that, you don't really find out until you are invested in like the industry that you want to work in. And I think Robinhood Snacks is just a really good digest to kind of read 5 minutes every morning. You know a lot about the industry. And then last but not least, This is Product Management is a podcast that I listen to on my phone. So I think every day or every week on a weekly basis, they'll release new episodes about product management. Whether that talks about like, oh, how to like streamline your services, how to become a better product manager, how to become more efficient, how to empathize with certain members on your team when there's a disagreement. It really helps you like find out what other product managers are having trouble like dealing with in their lives. And then afterwards, like it gives you kind of an eye to see like what product management is like from a professional perspective. And then application checkpoint. Oh, also someone's asking, will we have access to this PowerPoint after this workshop? Question mark. Stephanie, you can answer that question, but I'm pretty sure the answer is yes. So hopefully like I can send it in and like someone can send it to you after. But yeah, cool. Okay, back to the PowerPoint. So applications. So the most important thing is one, get a referral. Like I said in the past, that's like you're gonna bypass hundreds of people to get into the interview process. One thing I recommend is warm emailing. I think cold emailing or like cold calling is like a terrible strategy because you'll get like a really bad response rate. But if you warm email people, so it's like people you already have something in common with, or let's say they're like alum of your university that you know, there's a better chance you're gonna get a higher response. So something I do is like, let's say I wanna work at Slack, right? I would go on LinkedIn, click Slack, filter by my university, Cal Poly SLO, look at the alumni at my university who worked at Slack, and then hit them up, be like, hey, do you wanna have like a quick 15-minute chat about like your company or like your position, or I'm really interested in like what you're doing. Like I want to learn more about like what you're doing. And so I feel like that's the best way to get a high response rate. Another thing is like working on collaboration projects. So like similar to like what I did with the corporate tour or like a speaker panel series with people from my club, if you have a chance to work with alumni in specific projects that kind of demonstrate your work ethic and they'd be more comfortable like kind of endorsing you for a referral, I think that's a great spot. So like, yeah, I think one, it's really good because it brings benefits to like your peers, right? Your students, like your community, you get to like help them out and like bring them alumni experience and perspective. But at the same time, you also get to kind of support your credibility as a person. And then last but not least, build your LinkedIn profile. I saw this meme online. It was like, you know, you're an adult when you spend more time on LinkedIn than like Instagram and Facebook combined. And I was like, cool, that's me. I'm adulting. But LinkedIn is honestly super, super important and useful, I think, as a social media network. It's just so great because it connects you with like a lot of people in a professional kind of standing. And also there's more recruiters on LinkedIn than there are students. So a lot of the times, like, although you might not feel it, like recruiters are looking at your profile and they are looking at like your past accomplishments. So if you just keep on like creating content and like updating people about like your life, there's a good chance that like, you know, people will notice and they'll ask like, hey, are you interested in like working for this company? I've gotten like a lot of emails from recruiters just through LinkedIn because I've been so active on that platform. LinkedIn content creation is like a topic for another time, but I think good starters are like, let's say if you attend like a really cool conference or like a workshop or a seminar, and you can say like, hey, I learned a lot from this, and like tag a person or something like that. I think it really gets like people aware that like, oh, you're doing things, and it's like just really nice to get the word out there. Tailoring your resume. So when it comes to writing your resume, I think a lot of people just copy their resume like 60 times and send it out to different companies. But I actually recommend tailoring your resume according to each role. So within every single role or position that you apply for, there'll be like a description as to what they want you to do in the role. And a lot of times they have keyword filters, which basically pick out like the words that you have in your resume and see like what percent of that matches the job description. And if it passes a certain threshold, then they'll like look over your resume more, which I think is a really dumb algorithm, but that's what the industry does to make processes more efficient. So I think you'll do better if you have more words on your resume that match the job description. So like certain keywords that they're looking for, let's say like they want someone with Python or SQL experience, then make sure you put Python and SQL in your resume or cover letter. And then in terms of like how you organize your resume, top-down prioritization, the top thing on your resume should be the most important thing that you want a recruiter to see when they look down on your resume. For a lot of college students, that's like the college you go to or your education. But I'd put like the most important, like if you've taken like a lot of relevant courses, you put that on the top. If you've made like a lot of projects that like, you're proud of, that use like or incorporate certain technologies, put that on the top. If you've had an internship at a company that's like really noteworthy or the position's like really cool that has to do with what you're applying to, put that on the top. So top of your resume should always be like the first thing that the recruiter sees. So that should be like the most important thing that you put on there. Okay, cool. So next, interviews. They're gonna have like 3 different types of interviews, the first of which being the product design interview. So this one isn't an interview that's like required for most PMs, but sometimes you'll get it depending on the PM position you're applying for. What they cover in product design interviews are, one, you might get an app redesign prompt, which is like, here's the Handshake website, redesign it or like make it better. And so you would submit kind of like a completed portfolio as to like how you would make the design better. Or let's say like if it's like a face-to-face interview, they'll ask you, oh, how can you improve Facebook's reaction feature to create more engagement with the Facebook like online platform? And then you would kind of have to give them like ideas on how you would like make the buttons easier to swipe up on or like make it easier to click to get more engagement on Facebook's platform. App criticism is like pull out your phone, like what's the app that you hate the most on your phone and how would you change it? I think this is always a really fun and interesting question because it's like, if you hate an app so much, why is it still on your phone, right? And usually it's because it really shows like what you kind of prioritize as a product manager, whether that be like ease of UI design or like speed, how fast deliverables are, like the usage, the functionality of the product. Like let's say the product has a really ugly user interface, but it's also really important for you to like use on day-to-day life basis, then you definitely value like functionality more than design as a product manager. And I feel like that kind of comes through in your interviews. User empathy also, I think in design interviews, it's really important to like be able to connect with what the users want. You always want to think in like a user-focused mindset to know that like, oh, for users, like what they want from this product is this, and like how can you give that to them? In behavioral interviews, this is like your typical like, tell me about yourself. What's your greatest weakness? What's your greatest strength kind of question. Usually they're checking for like culture fit or authenticity. And it's just like kind of a gauging process to see like whether you're a good fit for the company. Do you want to work here because you actually like your company values, you like the company, you like the product, or are you just here because you like the name of the company itself? And it's also really important to see if you can kind of create a connection with the interviewer. A lot of the times, I know it's really hard, especially like now in COVID-19, it's like a virtual setting. So it's really hard to like kind of make a connection with the interviewer. But I think that if you can just like smile a lot, you know, be really enthusiastic and show you truly enjoy the company and the product and you want to learn more, then I think you're well positioned to land yourself a good result in the behavioral interview section. Last but not least, if you are applying for a more technical product management role, then you're going to have a lot of technical interviews. Usually these touch upon like basic data structures. So you'll have like questions like, how to reverse a linked list, or if you can write an algorithm to detect a palindrome. It's like pretty standard, I think, data structure questions. You'll get to answer these interview questions in either Java, Python, or C. People mostly choose Python. I think it's the easier language to interview in. And then sometimes they'll submit you like a HackerRank question. And now for Salesforce APM, they make you answer a HackerRank question. And I think the best way to like practice for those is honestly just like every single day, do a HackerRank question, answer a leak code problem. Usually PM interviews don't go harder than leak code medium. And good resources to have are like books like Cracking the Coding Interview and Cracking the PM Interview. Just one thing to note is that if you're interviewing in Python or C, these books are written in Java. So just like take that into consideration. But these are all really good resources for technical interviews. And yeah, before I go on Q&A, last thing is just like, it's really tough. I know like when I applied to all these PM jobs, I literally applied to like 20 positions and I got rejected from all of them on the same day. And I was just like crying because I was like, oh my God, life is such a mess. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good enough for this. But I think imposter syndrome, especially when you're working in tech, it's kind of a mindset that like plagues everybody in terms of like what they have or like to offer as a product manager. And if you're a high school student or you're a college student, like don't worry about it. I literally learned how to code and like design and find out I wanted to do like product management like a year ago. And like now I'm here. So I feel like, you know, I've made pretty solid progress. And if I can do this, like you can too, definitely. So yeah, that's pretty much it in terms of like the actual presentations. If you guys have any questions, feel free to email me or just like connect with me on LinkedIn. If there's anything I didn't touch upon here or you want like more like links to like the resources I put on my PowerPoint, like just contact me and I'll let you know. But I think now I'm good to go for like Q&A. If you guys have any questions, you guys can like click the raise hand feature and I'll unmute you to ask questions. Or if no one has any questions live on the spot, I know there's a spreadsheet with like actual questions. I can just pull off from that too if anybody like has any questions about PM.
I had a question.
Yeah.
So you did 2 internships in PM, or you did 1 internship in PM, right?
So yeah, I've done one so far in product management. My upcoming one is project management. Yeah.
Okay. And your PM internship, what did you work with?
Right. So the last one, what I worked with was our product was like campaigns. So if you've ever seen like the text campaigns, like text 1 2 3 4 5 to tree to follow more about like environmental sustainability policies, or like text campaigns, like that's kind of what my company did as a product feature. And so I kind of just tracked like the timeline of the campaigns to see how many people interacted with like the campaigns after. I remember my clients specifically were like Patagonia, Airbnb, Lyft. And so I know Patagonia did this whole like campaign with sustainability and like promoting their products for like a more environmental friendly usage. And so I tracked a lot of the clients for that campaign as like how they interacted with the campaigns. Maybe like they went through filling out like a certain campaign but they didn't finish it. Then I would like see conversion features and tools as to how we can get the customer to finish it. And I created like dashboards and like recommendations and insights, and like I forwarded that to my actual product manager.
Thank you. That sounds so cool.
Yeah, thanks. Looks like I think Dia has a question. So
Yeah. Hi. So I just had like I don't know if you answered this before. Sorry, I kind of joined halfway through, but could you explain the difference between product and project management?
yeah, so I think it was on the first slide, but product and project management, what the differences is that like product itself is you're kind of prioritizing features for a product. So like I said, like if your product was like the iPhone, then you'd be responsible for all the releases and kind of like the induction of the product from like its birth to like its end. So like let's say the specific iPhone you're in charge of, like they're rolling over to like the next iPhone, like iPhone 12 or like iPhone 13, then like that's your product's lifespan. So as a product manager, you're responsible for like the success basically of your product. So like if your product is successful, why? What are the metrics to that? How do you make it more successful if it's not successful enough? Project manager is when you have scopes already defined for you. So you're working on a smaller project within like a bigger scale, and you already have like the scope defined for you. You have like the PRDs, like the project requirement documents written for you, and you're kind of just following through on facilitating the project. So a lot about like what you do is you set up meetings with like your engineers, you set up meetings with your designers to make sure everyone is on track for the project releases. And you kind of have like a lot of meetings to make sure everyone's on the same like pace. So one is more like prioritization of features. Let's say like on the iPhone, one customer wants this feature, one customer wants that feature. You have to choose which feature you release, and like you kind of have to be like the bearer of bad news for a lot of people in that sense. Whereas for projects, they're more of like deadlines, timeliness, and how do you get this executed on time to meet your deadline.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so there's a question in the chat. I think I'll just answer it here. So what makes someone a strong software engineer versus a product manager? Ooh, okay. So I think that a lot of people go from software engineering to product management because as a software engineer, I think it's really cool that you get to kind of like have ownership over your product in the sense that you kind of work towards building it. But a lot of people, like, what they don't like about software engineering in the end is that they're being told what to code and they don't really have like kind of a say or like a vision of what they're coding. So that's why a lot of software engineers end up wanting to be product managers, is because they have more of a say in the vision in terms of like what they're making. What makes someone a strong program or like product manager? I think having solid software engineering experience definitely will do that, because it leads you to being able to having productive conversations with your engineers on your team. But you also have to have a lot of the skills I'd say that software engineers don't have, in the sense that software engineering, I don't think like communicating with a lot of people is like a huge like thing, or like communicating with stakeholders at least. You're gonna have to talk a lot with like people on your team, but product management, it's a lot more about like user empathy and like how do you meet the goals of not only like your project manager, but also the stakeholders, and like what do the customers want to see in general. I think PM is more like of a customer centric kind of mindset, whereas software engineering is more like, okay, this is the problem, how do I fix it? It's more of a problem solving mindset. And I think that a lot of product managers, they can be really good product managers without having to be good software engineers. So like there are product managers that come from non-technical backgrounds. Let's say they got their major in like philosophy or something, nothing to do with computer science, right? But they still apply the same like thought processes and principles and like perspectives as like someone who's a really good product manager. So I think that they're not mutually exclusive. You can be a good product manager with software engineering experience, but I don't think it's like necessary or required. I hope that answers your question. And the second one is, what does a PM resume look like? Should it be as traditional as a software engineering resume, or can it be more creative? Do you include technical projects? Okay, so I don't think there's like a standard for what a PM resume looks like. A lot of companies, definitely if you're trying to go for a more technical position, you want to have more technical projects. If you competed at like a hackathon, you won first place, like pop that on there. If you made like a lot of cool projects and they're on your GitHub repo, link your GitHub on there, and then also like talk about like what you did in the projects, like what you made them for. Software engineering resumes, I think, yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like. But then also you want to have a lot of more leadership experience like written on it. So like, let's say you're like leading a hackathon organizing team, or let's say you're like the president or like a vice president of a club that you're doing, or even if you're like working in a corporate outreach liaison position, having the leadership skills I think is really helpful, because as a product manager, you're leading a team, and that's something that they really want to see. And I think a PM resume that might not necessarily be in a software engineering resume. There's more of a focus on like your soft skills and ability to work with people, rather than like dimensions of like certain languages that you might know or frameworks that you've experienced as a software engineer. Next question, do smaller companies like startups have a lot of PM roles, or is this career mainly for established tech companies? I think startups have less PM roles just because they're a startup and they just have less people, less employees working at the companies. I think bigger companies have more structured PM programs. So like associate, like product manager programs, like I said, in other companies, like those typically go into bigger companies. They'll have like structured programs that like walk you through being an associate product manager, and like they promote you to a senior product manager. So there's more structure to the program itself. But when you work in a startup, I think it's also really cool because they give you more like responsibility. In a startup, you're wearing a lot of different hats. Like one day you'll be doing design, next day you'll be doing marketing, next day you'll be doing like engineering stuff. So I think there's more flexibility to like learn different things. Whereas you get a lot more like structure and guidance from like older PMs or PMs who might have been in your spot in a bigger company. But I don't think like you get to move around as much. So yeah, hope that answers your question. Cool. I think that's it in the chat, but if anybody has any more questions, you can put them in the chat or like do the raise hand feature. Do you have another question?
I just sent one in. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. Cool. What's your favorite question from a PM interview? What's the hardest one? Either one that you've been in or one that you've seen. Ooh, okay. I think hardest, okay, favorite question versus hardest question. I think my favorite question is like, this is really generic. It's not like a super hard question, but like when people usually ask me like, oh, what's like your favorite project that you worked on, or like what's your like favorite part about like being a PM intern, or like why do you want to be a PM intern? When I get that question in interviews, I think it's like a really good opportunity for me to talk about my previous experiences and kind of sell myself as a candidate. So I like those questions because like they give me an avenue to talk more about myself and pitch myself. As for what the hardest question was that I've gotten, it was like, it was something I was unprepared for because I didn't really prep for PM interviews beforehand, but I think it was like a Google question. They asked me like, how would you redesign an oven for like someone who was like in a wheelchair to be able to access like this oven, like ease of accessibility? And like I never really thought about that question, so I was just sitting here like, make the handles bigger. Like I don't really know, right? So like obviously didn't do too well on that question, but afterwards like I prepped a lot more for questions like case-based questions and situation-based questions, I think. I'm also like do a lot of consulting at my school, like consulting club stuff. So I've gotten questions for case studies that have been like really, really weird. So like this one like company asked like, oh, if you were to like make the Red Sea rise by 1 inch by draining the blood of all these people, like how many people would you have to kill? And I'm like, that's such a morbid question. Like, why would you ask me that? But like all these questions, what they really do is they test your problem solving skills and like your flexibility and creativity when it comes to answering a question. You don't want to give like very basic questions that I feel like everyone else would use to answer. They're trying to test your creativity as a product manager. Like, how would you solve a problem that you might face in the future, right? Like, how would you approach it with a different mindset? So I think it's more about the process as to how you solve it rather than the solution that you give them in a PM interview. Are there PM internships available for high schoolers? If so, how can we obtain it? Okay, so I think for high schoolers, it's very hard to get internships. They're like programs simply because a lot of them are more tailored for college students. One thing I would recommend, I know they do have internships for high schoolers for certain programs. I'm not sure which companies because I didn't really start looking for internships until I was in college, to be honest. But certain companies do offer high school internship programs. They might not be called internships, they might be called like fellowships. So I'd look into those. Or even if like you have like parents or like friends who like work at a certain company you're interested in, it never hurts to like tell them, hey, I'm interested in this. Do you think you'd be willing to take on like a high schooler? I'm not a proponent for unpaid internships, but I know that as a high schooler, it's really hard to just get internship opportunities. So if you do have like an opportunity to do an internship and it's unpaid, I wouldn't like be too much against it. But once you go to college, like don't take unpaid internships because you always deserve a salary. Yes. Okay. What places did you intern at? Is there a list of startups near our area? Well, to answer that question, I'd have to know what your area is. So if you type that in, maybe I can help you. In terms of what places I've interned at, I interned at Geodis International, which is a company, they do supply chain logistics. They're headquartered in France, but I worked in their branch in Anaheim. And I interned in Washington, D.C. at Phone to Action, which is a startup that I got through TreeHacks last year. And then this summer, I'm working at Salesforce, which is in San Francisco, but the internship is remote due to COVID-19. California. List of startups near California. Honestly, just like go to Silicon Valley, just start walking down the street. Like there's plenty of startups. If you want to find a list of startups to work for, I feel like Y Combinator would be a good website to look at. They do back a lot of like venture-based startups that have just been starting. I know popular ones are like Airtable, Snowflake, Robinhood, Samsara, Stripe. If you look into like a lot of startups, I feel like startups are harder to get into as high schoolers or college students because they usually require more like work from your side. So they're looking for someone with like experience at a bigger corporation before you jump into a startup. But I think always just like be on the lookout. Go online, do research. If you have career fairs at your school, you'll be likely to like come across a startup that you're like near at your college or high school. So yeah, just keep an eye out for opportunities. You never know when they come. So I think just like be open to working at different places, whether that be a startup or a bigger company, and eventually you'll find your way. Cool. Okay. I think that's all the questions in the chat, but what college am I in? I go to Cal Poly SLO, which is short for California Polytechnic State University, San Luis Obispo. It is 3 hours away from San Francisco, 4 hours away from LA, right in the middle, Central Valley, right next to the beach. It's pretty nice. Oh, thank you. It's really nice. I'm glad this was helpful for you.
I have another question. So do you have experience in both product and project management?
Me?
Yeah.
Product and project, or?
Yeah, do you have experience in both of them? I was wondering if you have a preference.
Yeah, so, well, I have experience in product management because I did it last summer. This upcoming summer, I'm doing projects. So I don't know if I consider it experience because it's not starting until summer. But I think project management experience isn't something that's like only restricted to having an internship in that field. If you're a high schooler or you're a college student who hasn't had an internship in the past, you can definitely have project management experience just by literally like leading a group project. If you're a part of the club on campus and like you're leading an activity or you're making a conference, like if you're organizing a hackathon, that's a project management role. Like I don't think you need to have a specific PM title to be able to have project management experience. So I think that, yeah, that answers your question. For me, more product-based just because of my previous internship, but project-based in the future. But I think projects also like apply to a lot of things I've done in the past. And I think it would also apply for a lot of people here too and like what they've done.
Do you have a preference for doing one of product or project management?
I like doing product because I think it's nicer to have a tangible project to work on, or sorry, like a tangible product to like organize. When you're doing projects, a lot of times you get migrated from different projects. And so it's like once you're done with like one thing, you get moved on to another, which is great if like you have a short attention span and you don't like working on the same thing all the time. But I think really like I get like emotionally attached to like the product I'm working with. So I think I treat it as like a baby, right? And then like when it goes to market and it becomes successful, like that makes me happy. So I think I like working with a product just because of like the tangibility and accountability of it you get when you work on the product itself.
I think that's all the questions in the chat, but if you want to go towards the spreadsheet that I sent you, then maybe we can answer some of those.
Oh yeah, for sure. Let me pull that up really quick.
I also have it pulled up, so I can just ask questions directly from that too.
Yeah, actually, that'd be great. I'm like losing my
Okay, great. So the first one was, are there any specific extracurriculars to pursue in college to go into PM?
I'm not a big fan of like fat or like kind of like just making sure you do the right things just because like it looks good on your resume. I think college is really a time for you to kind of explore what you want to do. To be honest, I didn't really know I wanted to do PM until I got into college and I like joined the organizations that I did join. This is like really unrelated to PM, but I think debate is something I did in high school, which I think would be really nice for like professional development just in general, because like you put in time to research something, right? And then you like make sure you have a good argument for it and then like you pitch it out. It helps you in terms of like critical thinking and like public speaking skills, which I think is really important if you want to pitch yourself because you're selling a product, which is like yourself in this case to someone. So I think speech and debate was like really helpful for me. In terms of what I'm involved with in college, hackathon organizing, I think it's really cool just because you get to put on an event for a lot of people who come together, build a product, and it's like really awesome just to meet people who have all these great ideas. You get really connected with like a lot of sponsors that you work with when you organize hackathons, and also just like you get to see what cool products people are working on. A lot of startups also come from like hackathons or like startup marathons. So it's also a good opportunity to like join a startup team if you are interested in that environment. I'm involved also with consulting club, which is like consulting is when you advise certain companies in problem solving. So let's say like they aren't making enough money this year. How do you solve their problems to make sure that they earn a higher margin next year? And I think that like consulting, it's also like a very problem solving based career, which helps in terms of product management because you're trying to fix problems with the company. And product management, you're trying to fix products with the product itself. So I think like honestly, anything that uses critical thinking makes you work in a team with a lot of people, makes you interact with a lot of people in teams and like work through different types of personalities. I think it would be a good extracurricular activity. If everyone had like the same clubs that they did in PM interviews, like that'd be so boring. So I really think just like do something that you find that's really fun, but also at the same time, like it shows that you have leadership skills throughout. I think that you'll be good for PM.
Sounds great. I also think that answers another question that someone had, which was if you have no product management experience, how can you establish projects to show your capabilities? Are
Yeah.
hackathons and academic projects enough?
Hackathons, I think hackathons and academic projects are definitely like a good place to start, especially in your freshman year when you're not expected to have an internship prior to that as experience. It's good to list like projects that you're doing, hackathons you're participating in, or like classes that you've taken that provide knowledge for like what you're doing. I know a lot of people typically don't start off with like PM internships. They get like software engineering internships, and then afterwards like that leads to a PM internship because they've proven that they have the technical competency to like code. Now you can just like have to prove that you have the soft skills to manage a team.
In any of your PM interviews, did you talk about your hackathon projects?
Actually, frankly, no one asked me about hackathon projects. They've asked me about like what it felt like to be an organizer on a hackathon team because I think that speaks to my leadership abilities. But I haven't been asked specifically about the projects. I think projects are more important if you're applying for a software engineering position, as they want to see how you implemented code and how you like your process was like making the project. But for product management, they usually ask higher level questions relating to like the company's product or if it's related to your experience, just like things like what did you enjoy about your internship. So no one has really like asked me about my specific like hackathon projects.
Okay, I think we can ask a couple more questions until we get to 6 p.m.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
the next one's, what skills can we sharpen this summer if we're interested in PM?
This summer, if you want to be a technical PM, definitely coding. I would look into the company you're interested in being a PM for, check out what their tech stack is. If they work with like React, Django, or like Go or something, build the specific skills for their framework. Because like a lot of people know these backend coding languages, but if you know the framework of the company that you're applying for, or like let's say you want to apply for Facebook and you know how to use like Origami Studio, or you want to apply for Apple and you know how to use Swift, I think that really gives you a leg up because it shows that you're interested in the company and you're willing to learn their frameworks. In terms of other courses or skills to build, I think talking to people is really important. I know that's like a skill, but I think it's a really good idea this summer just to like set up virtual calls with people, start networking, start like talking to people online. Hey, do you want to have a call? Talk about like what your job is, what your career is. The more you have these interactions, the less awkward your interviews are going to be because by then you'll be so accustomed to like talking to people that it won't be like an awkward process. For me, at least, I know when I started like virtually interviewing, it was like really awkward at first because it's not like the same experience you get from like face-to-face interactions. But I just like called a lot of people, did practice interviews, and like by the time I did my Salesforce one, I wasn't nervous at all. I was just like, oh, this is normal. Are product management positions limited to tech companies? No, that is a great question. No, they are not. A lot of tech companies do have PM positions for like their web products, but there's also like hardware products. I'm trying to think. Let's say you work at like, I don't know. Let's say you work at Home Depot and you want to be like a product manager for their constructions innovation like segment. And let's say your product is like the interior decorations like field where you like have paints and you have like decorational products and you have sofas and furniture. You could be like a product manager for that, right? Or if you're working in the healthcare industry and you want to like, there's a patent on like a new bio tool to like find the cure for a certain disease, like you could be a product manager for that. So product managing isn't limited to tech companies. You can basically be a PM in all sorts of industries. How many hackathons did you lead in high school? 0. I was not a hackathon organizer in high school. I started organizing hackathons in college, which goes to show that like you guys are starting way earlier than me, so you guys are ready for this.
And I had one question. So in your freshman year internship, you said that you had a call with the VP of product management or project management. What did you say on that call? Like, did you just say, someone told me to call you, so here I am?
Oh no, so I asked the recruiter to set me up with like a product manager, and then she just set me up with a VP of product. So I was really put off by that because I was like, oh, I am not important enough to be talking to this person. It was really bad, or like it was really awkward, I think, at first, because he was in the East Coast and I was in the West Coast, and he said he'd call me at 10 a.m. So I thought it was 10 a.m. in the West Coast time, but it was actually 7. So I missed my first call time, and it was really bad because I like basically missed my interview, and I was like, hey, I'm really sorry. I got mixed up with time zones. Like, can I call you back? And he was like, yeah, sure, not a problem. So he was like really nice about that, which I don't know if other companies would have given me a second chance. But basically, he just asked me why I wanted to work in product rather than work in tech. And I basically told him, like, one, I think, like, coding is nice, but it's not something I like really want to be doing this entire summer. I want to work on like a more high level kind of scope. And then also I told him like about the PM like tools I was working with. I did research on the company, what their products were. So the fact that I think I knew a lot about their products, like he was like, okay, that makes a good fit for like the product management role. Someone said, what's your dream company? Ooh, that's a good question. I think right now I'm still choosing between whether I want to work at a bigger company or like a startup. I think startups really exciting, but also I know that like bigger companies have a more structured like kind of PM roadmap. So it'd be really nice to work at a big company as well. I think that when I'm at the point where I'm graduating, I'll probably have a better idea of like where the market is and where my skills will necessarily meet where the market is. And by then I'll make a good decision. But for now, I don't really have like a dream company in mind. I just want to like be able to intern at different companies to see what's a good match for me.
And one last question from the spreadsheet is, how do you maintain effective communication if things are looking messy or all over the place?
If things are looking messy all over the place, I think that I would say Jira or Asana. So basically there's a lot of tools that can help you track, like organize different like goals or timelines or like to-do lists. Asana, if you guys have ever used it, it's like a huge like to-do list tracker. So like they have like a bunch of like clipboards and you can like put all the things that you have to do, and they let you assign each task to one person. So there's like a bigger accountability level for that. And then also for Jira, they basically start sectioning or proportioning off like stacks on a point-based system. So let's say like everybody on your team is allowed to take up to 8 points of tasks every week. So let's say that there's a bigger task and there's a smaller task. So the big task would be worth like 4 points and the small task would be like 1 point. As soon as one person like reaches the 8-point capacity, they're not allowed to take on more projects or else they'll be overwhelmed. So I think that's also a really good tool to use to kind of like distribute like tasks out to everyone, but make sure like everyone's doing an equal amount of work and no one person is like carrying the team or feeling super overwhelmed. So yeah, I think those are really good like technologies to check out.
Any last questions from our participants?
If you guys have any questions also that you don't feel comfortable like asking everyone, it's totally fine. You can just send me an email and I'll be more than happy to get back to you on that.
Okay, with that, I think we're ready to end the workshop. I'm going to just share the ending slide right here.
Awesome.
So thank you so much, Amy, for hosting this workshop. It was really informative and really interesting. We also received a lot of great feedback on our form already, so that's great to see as well. If you want to get more involved with Superposition workshops, then be sure to sign up for our mailing list or follow us on social media. And if you found this workshop helpful like I did, please be sure to donate to our PPE fundraiser. Even $1 can help save a life. And thank you so much for coming. Have a great rest of your evening.
Yeah, thank you.